Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. I've got a few questions, quite a few prepared for you.
All right.
Hopefully they're all relevant.
Okay.
So my YouTube channel is called The Living Perspective right now. I'm probably going to change that and kind of tune in more towards this kind of thing.
Okay.
Because with my dad's court case and everything going on, this has kind of fired me up and inspired me to take action against these kind of corrupt government programs. So my name is Wesley McNair. This is Dustin De Moss, and he is a retired Air Force veteran who's been involved with some government programs that were obviously lacking in some forms of integrity and involving some corruption. So the first thing I want to ask you, Dustin, is just to get a little bit of background about yourself so they can get to know you a little bit more. So tell us, how did you get into the military and everything to begin with?
I just basically went to the recruiter's office and went in the normal way, went through MEPS, military entrance processing, and then I shipped off to basic training. When I was, the reason I chose the field I chose, which was aircraft fuel system mechanic, was because I wanted to get in there quicker, and that was the quickest way to get in. And then I'm going to go ahead and tell what I did.
Absolutely.
But I worked on the stealth fighter, the first stealth fighter, F-117, and
Blackbird.
Yeah.
A lot of people are familiar with that.
Yeah, anyways, so when you're, I think the main point of basic training and everything is to learn how to compartmentalize information and stuff. That's not, I mean, of course you're working as a unit and everything, but once you're actually in the military, you learn to compartmentalize all kinds of information, so.
Absolutely, that's what I've heard about all of these programs, is that things are so compartmentalized that you might be in a program, working for a program, and you might not have any idea what the program is actually working towards. For example, a lot of people who were involved in the Manhattan Project, developing the first nuclear bomb, a lot of those people who were actually involved with developing that had no idea what they were doing. Yeah. Because it was so compartmentalized. So
and I'm speaking on the mental aspects as well. So like, mental aspects is you learn how to compartmentalize information. Like I couldn't tell like my family like certain stuff about the F-117, and I couldn't tell them, you know, when I was going on deployment or where I was going on deployment, that kind of stuff. So you have to keep even your family in the dark as far as what you're doing, you know.
Exactly. And do you think that has something to do with the way that they program you to almost make you, whenever someone like asks you a question about it or something, do you almost kind of like naturally want to avoid the question because of the programming or something?
Yeah. Now it's not so much an issue, but back in the day it was definitely an issue, and I think that's what led to a lot of what we're getting into. So.
And I've heard about other government insiders. For example, Pete Peterson is a government insider I'm very familiar with, and he's had an issue where they actually apparently use this type of technology where as soon as he started to release classified information, they would actually apparently use this type of technology where they would make him fall asleep, make him have panic attacks right as he was starting to get into really deep information.
Yeah.
And then he said that could be something to do with the programming that they did, the mind control type of programming, or it could be a technology which he called the voice of God technology.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Now, voice of God technology, I never heard any voices or anything like that, but I definitely have like I'll hear like. It's almost like tinnitus, you know, like you'll hear like these clicks in your ear or something. But it honestly, I don't even notice it. But and then let's see. So the panic attacks and all that kind of stuff, I think that is definitely ingrained in you, just from the basic military experience, you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
But
I can see that.
But I mean, I have panic attacks all the time, and basically I do my own like meditations and that kind of stuff to get out of it.
Absolutely, that's good. That's awesome. And man, meditation is such a helpful tool when it comes to dealing with PTSD and stuff like
Yeah.
that, which so many people end up with coming back from the military. So, tell us a little bit. So, you worked on the SR-71 Blackbird.
No, the F-117.
F-117.
Nighthawk.
Nighthawk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I said SR-71. Okay.
I knew people who worked on SR-71.
Okay.
I was jealous of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that parts of the propulsion system for the SR-71 were classified, and then because they had something to do with anti-gravity.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's pretty interesting. So after working on the Nighthawk project, do you have any more to tell us about that, or do you?
Yeah, after working on the Nighthawk was basically the basis for you develop the skills such as compartmentalization in your mind and that kind of stuff to keep people in the dark. And once I got out of the military, basically I had fudged some facts to get out of the military. And the reason is because I was also applying to the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, and some other agencies. So once I got out,
did you have any reason for wanting to leave the military? Were you feeling like were you not enjoying it, or were you more interested in working for the CIA or something?
I was definitely more interested in working for the CIA.
Okay.
I wanted to get my bachelor's degree. I eventually got it, but my bachelor's is in international relations.
Okay.
And if you research what international relations means to the intelligence world, it's a research background, so you can be an analyst, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
It's also for diplomats, basically State Department, which is what the CIA uses to place their spies in different countries. They use it through the State Department. So after I got out of the military, I went and tried to get my bachelor's degree, and I was applying to the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agencies, all that kind of stuff.
Okay. So you said you got your bachelor's degree in international relations?
Yes.
Which is, okay, so that's why they were interested in you. And you said the CIA program was a Cambridge University?
No,
was that something different?
well, yeah, you're right, but
Okay.
the company behind where I was to get a job, this guy called out of nowhere. He called, basically he must have got my information off of Defense Intelligence or CIA or something, because they also share with contractors. And it was Cambridge International Systems Incorporated.
Okay.
They've now changed their name, but I was basically going up for a Joint Chiefs to work with the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and it was a cyber intelligence position. After I got out of the military, I had been working as a cyber intelligence analyst for a private corporation. It wasn't a defense contractor; it was just a private corporation. And
Okay.
so after I got out and I was working in that cyber intelligence field, then I got this offer to go to the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. I'm 23.
Wow, yeah, 23 working with
yeah.
the Joint Chiefs of Staff, that's
Yeah.
a pretty high position there.
So, I mean, it would have been the most amazing thing.
So you're obviously really excited about this.
I guess if it was on the basis of what they were saying it was, which I don't think that's what it was. I think that was a cover for something else.
Exactly.
So,
Oh man, but it all sounds great.
Yeah,
It all sounded
yeah.
great, right?
yeah.
Oh man, so while you were working, did you work for the cybersecurity organization for a while, or?
No, I worked for cyber intelligence as a cyber intelligence analyst for a private corporation, and then I never actually got to go to Cambridge International Systems
Okay.
because of what was happening during that time. So
Okay, so let's get into a little bit of that, and then I want to talk about JASCA a little bit. But why did you decide not to go work for the Cambridge cyber?
Well, the funny thing is 3 days before that guy called, about the position, I was getting hacked, and a lot of what was being fed to me on the internet was about the Illuminati.
Really?
It was supposedly an official Illuminati thing, and then also I was being shown these videos, one of which I remember, which was How to Operate Your Brain by Timothy Leary. And in that video, it seemed like I was mirroring a lot of what that video was talking about, which is it's a very scary video, especially when you're not in the right state of mind.
Very strange video to watch, indeed.
And see, I'm not sure that they weren't putting LSD or something in my drinks at the house or something, because I never had any instance of any type of mental illness or anything like that. And all of a sudden, when in those 3 days that they started hacking me and sending all this stuff, it was like I was a totally different person, you know. And you know, mirroring what was in that video, it almost leads me to think that they were doing some type of MK Ultra or something, you know.
I was just about to bring that up.
Yeah.
I was going to say, let's talk a little bit about MK Ultra for people who aren't familiar with MK Ultra. It was basically a CIA mind control operation that was created after World War II during Project Paperclip, whenever the United States recruited a bunch of 1,600 Nazi scientists to come work for different parts of the United States, like, for example, NASA and things like that. So MK Ultra, again, is the mind control program where they've utilized LSD mainly as their truth chemical drug. They believe that they can make people, they can strongly influence people. Also, they use things like hypnosis and electronic shock therapy, which we've talked about off camera as well. Just for the people who aren't aware of this type of thing, you can look up MK Ultra on YouTube and find videos that go into detail and explain everything that went down then. So, and that's still going on today, most likely. All right. So.
Yep.
So let's continue on from there.
And during that period of time. Okay, so this is one point that I haven't really shared with a lot of people, but I've only shared this with my family and that kind of stuff. But it felt like while I was going through that episode in my life, it felt like I had a Kundalini awakening, and when I was going through that actual, you know, the craziness of what was going on, it was like there was a pulsating. It was like my third eye was pulsating, and when I finally went into the hospital and I told the doctor that, he said, "Oh, that's psychosomatic," and I was like, "Okay, I know what psychosomatic means." You know, that's just where people think that something's happening when it's not, and I was like, "This is actually happening," you know. And
it's amazing that you say that, because that's something that I've heard from other insiders. Mainly the pulsating feeling at the center of the eyebrows, the pineal gland or the pineal chakra.
It was pulsating, like, I mean, it was you could definitely feel it, and it was.
I believe that's a technology.
Yeah, it was something, and the thing is like, while this was happening, yes, I have been discredited, and yes, you know, it says on paper that I have a certain mental illness, but the thing is like, whatever was causing that third eye to open was giving me information about the world that wasn't accurate, you know, like wasn't like, you know, like when I was walking down the streets at one point, it was kind of raining and everything. I heard a footstep in the water. I looked down and there's an outline of a shoe there, but nothing's there, you know? So
that's strange.
But I don't like to talk about that, because that actually gives credit to the
mental illness,
discredit.
which is probably why they did that.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
And the thing is like, if you read about what mental illness they say I have, you would not meet somebody with that mental illness who has a clear mind like me, is able to talk about these things like me.
Very intellectual.
Yeah.
You write poems.
Yeah.
Poems.
Yeah.
You don't have a mental illness.
I have a master's degree.
Yeah, exactly.
So and then all the stuff I've done after that, you know. So I mean, it's like yeah, you can discredit me, but I'm going to come back and I'm going to show you that I'm more than what you put me down. You tried to put me down as a dog, and I'm not a dog, you know.
Exactly.
So.
Exactly, man. That is amazing, and it's actually oh man, it's actually very frustrating to hear that they do this type of thing to people, you know, because there's so many other people out there that I'm sure, you know, just like you, who have been discredited, been publicly discredited, diagnosed with a mental disorder that you don't have, and then, you know, paid off by they pay you disability to keep you quiet, so you don't tell your story. So that's
and I have friends that were in the CIA. I don't talk to the guy I told you about who my dad was friends with this guy who was a major player in Air America, which was a CIA operation in the Asia region. He was actually his insurance person for that guy. He had a ranch in OK, Oklahoma, and so there's things about back when I was growing up and stuff that we knew certain people, you know, that probably maybe had some type of influence later on, you know. But
absolutely.
But
yeah, that's how it ends up happening from what I've heard from other insiders.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I still know guys that were one guy that was in the CIA today. And he has confirmed to me that they do weird stuff like that. And he said his exact words were that the people in that agency are evil as shit, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And you know, it's not just the CIA, it's also the Illuminati works with the, you know, it's all
NSA.
It's all connected, you know?
Obviously,
Yeah.
absolutely. I wanted to say something real quick, just for anyone who, when you brought up the Kundalini, a lot of people might not know what the Kundalini is.
Yeah.
And just to explain briefly what the Kundalini is, basically, it's talked about in many ancient spiritual practices as being described as a coil of white light. They depict it as being like a serpent of coiled white light. It sits at the base chakra. And when activated, essentially you have to cleanse your chakras before the Kundalini is allowed to activate. And actually activating the Kundalini without properly cleansing the chakras apparently can be dangerous. So I just wanted to put that out there so people know what the Kundalini is and how to look up and find that information, because that's also a very, very important topic as well. Really good.
Yeah.
But anyway, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, go ahead with whatever questions you have next.
Sure. So let's see. One thing you told me off camera that we haven't mentioned yet was the fact that you had your parents had secret officers or
Okay, so while I was in the psych ward, I knew that I was a part of something. It's funny. I knew that I was a part of something that was even during my instability in my mind at that time, I knew that I was part of something that needed to be exposed. So I had done something to get the Secret Service involved. And when the Secret Service investigated me and investigated my parents and investigated all of us, the guy, he was this tall black guy, he was a really nice guy, amazing. I mean, he was a former Air Force, just like me. He had been to Tinker, Oklahoma, which is where I'm from, Tinker Air Force Base, Oklahoma. And he told my parents, because he really liked us, he said, your son was involved in some government program. He said basically the agencies weren't cooperating with him to get information on what I was involved in. And he said 40% of the people in these programs have a mental breakdown. So
wow.
And he said that's all I can say on this, and I've already said too much. You know.
Wow. why would 40% of people have a mental breakdown from
Exactly.
these programs?
Yeah.
You know.
He said, he basically said he couldn't get more information, but he found out, you know, these things. So, and he said, I've already said too much, and, you know.
While you were in the hospital, did they give you any type of, I mean, were they giving you drugs every day to take?
Yeah. And I would, I mean, the funny thing is I took down like 3 cops while I was in there.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, because I had so much adrenaline because I was like in the state of panic, you know. And
I could understand.
Yeah.
That. Oh my gosh.
So, and they would give me shots just to make me like go to sleep, so they didn't have to deal with me. You know?
Wow.
So, because I knew I was involved in something bizarre because I never had any mental illness before. You know, so.
Wow. Oh man, that's
And plus, you know, the thing is the Joint Chiefs of Staff job, you know, all this other stuff. I've met with, when I was 17 years old, I have a picture of me with Admiral Fallon. So I've met people that probably influenced that whatever I was getting into, you know. So. You know, it's
Admiral Fallon?
Yeah, William Fallon.
William Fallon. Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
he was over the Iraq and Afghanistan stuff in 2003, 2004. So so you know, I had emailed him a couple weeks before all this, and what's interesting is I think he was the board advisor for CrowdStrike, which is a cyber intelligence firm. And at the time I was trying to get into MIT for the political science program. It's not very well known that MIT has a political science program. I was going to get my PhD and all that kind of stuff. But anyways, so. I don't know where I was going.
That's okay. That's okay. Information. It's getting on camera, man.
Yeah.
That's good stuff. I wasn't aware that MIT had a cybersecurity program.
It was a political science program.
Oh, political science.
Yeah. Because I'd got my bachelor's in international relations, and I was going to go and get my PhD in political science. And so because I had met Admiral Fallon when I was 17, I emailed him and talked to him, or I got his secretary. I didn't actually get information with him, but I got his secretary to give him the information that I wanted to get into MIT, which he was also, he was part of MIT for some type of like fellowship or something. I don't know what it was, I don't know. But so that was a couple weeks beforehand, and I got a reply. She said to send different information, but I never sent it because and the funny thing is he was with CrowdStrike, which is the cyber intelligence. I think it's CrowdStrike. I'm not sure, but it was a cyber intelligence firm that he was also part of. You know.
Okay. Okay. All right. Oh man. So let's get into a couple of these questions here. So one of the most interesting and compelling parts of your testimony is this program you're involved in, JASTA. JASTA. Okay, so
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about that program and how you first heard about that, how you got involved.
Okay.
With that.
So, all right. Where do I start? Basically, my theory on these, what happens when you show interest in the CIA and these different types of things. Basically, you're a person of interest. So my theory is that when you show that you're a person of interest is that they make a psychological profile of you. And when they make a psychological profile of you, they see what you can do to help them later on. And I would say that most of the time, because I've been a Huffington Post blogger in the past, and I wrote about how Trump I was 30 days before the mainstream media, and I've deleted it all, but I was 30 days before the mainstream media on the Russia thing with Trump. So I think they are able to put you in certain situations where you have certain influence, but they also have a psychological profile of you, so they know what makes you tick. You know, and the thing, what I'm trying to get at, don't just disregard the thing about the Huffington Post. But the thing I'm trying to get at is when I went for this JASTA program, I think they had a psychological profile of me when they told this woman to recruit me for the lobbying practice, the lobbying firm or whatever. But basically, JASTA, what we did was that I was recruited to lobby against JASTA, which is President Obama vetoed this bill. It's called Justice Against Sponsors of Terrorism, something like that. Anyways, Obama had vetoed that bill, and then the Congress and the Senate had overrode his veto. Now, before going back to the psychological profile, before I had been recruited, when I was being recruited to go on this trip, I researched everything about JASTA. They know I would do that. And I knew that there was something off about this program. So when I went into, when I was recruited and I went to Washington, D.C., I knew that I was going to expose all this. So it was paid for. What we were doing was paid for by Saudi Arabia to lobby against the 9/11 families, because the 9/11 families are suing Saudi Arabia. And one of the things that which I think may come from this issue is that we'll get more information on who was actually behind 9/11, because when there's a courtroom proceeding, there's I forget the term for it, but there's where you gather evidence. You gather evidence against certain.
I just went to one yesterday.
It's like
day before yesterday, actually.
You can gather more evidence than what is on the basis there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So basically, that's what I think is going on with this whole lawsuit. But the thing about me is I exposed all this because I got inside with the group in there, and I sent all the emails to Terry Strada, who's head of the 9/11 families. And we exposed this, and what I was one of the most impactful whistleblowers on this, because after I was done whistleblowing, they created a new law in Iowa where the lady who recruited me was from, because she was a state official and she was lobbying for foreign governments in Washington, D.C. So they created a new law where you couldn't lobby for foreign governments and be a state official. So.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't have to name her if you don't want to.
But see, that it all comes back to the basis of you're being a, you're not a willing participant. You're being used for certain ends to certain means, and it's not like I didn't want to go on that trip, but it's like they knew I would want to go on that trip because they had my psychological profile,
Wow. So that's how you think that the Illuminati and everything, how they get people and.
Well, no. That's just one aspect of it.
Right.
That's just one aspect.
Absolutely.
I also have this theory about how they're able to communicate with people, such as through the internet, because they can hack you like they hacked me.
When you said they sent you a lot of emails, I guess.
No, they actually got into my computer and were popping up videos and popping up websites and stuff.
So they were remote accessing your computer.
Yes.
Did it seem like they were trying to recruit you, or they were?
It did seem like they were trying to recruit me, but it also seemed like they were doing some crazy shit too. Like that video. You watched that Timothy Leary video.
Absolutely, yeah. Very strange. Like you said, if you're not in the right state of mind, it can almost be scary.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the stuff he talks about is just strange.
Yeah.
Some of it's kind of mind-blowing. When he talks about the universe being chaotic, and we think about how much space there is and everything, it's this chaos, and that's the state of the human brain. I don't know, it kind of draws you in a little bit, doesn't it? You know?
And if you think about that video and you look at that video, it's an LSD trip video. So
Yeah.
why were they sending me that while I was going through this whole mental illness thing? Unless they had put some type of LSD
Unless
or
they
something.
were using LSD
I mean,
somehow.
I don't know what they were doing. Maybe they were researching what happens when you put a whole bunch of LSD in somebody's stuff. You know, I don't know.
Well, that's exactly what MK Ultra was all about, was figuring out how LSD could make people tell the truth,
Maybe
or be influenced.
Maybe it's something where they were trying to see how to influence somebody over the internet. You know, when you have these drugs in their house or something. I don't know, but.
And that, I mean, the combination of using, for example, I'm sure that video was probably producing some type of frequencies or tones, like the sound of that video.
It was, yeah.
So that combined with LSD, which is just making your mind just, malleable and everything.
Yeah.
I'm sure it would make it that effect of whatever those tones were a lot more useful.
It may not have been LSD, it may have been some other kind of
May have been another research chemical that they just, something a lot like LSD possibly.
Yeah.
My experiences with LSD have been awesome. I've never had a bad experience, but I could see how they could use it to make you tell the truth and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's pretty interesting. So just to clarify again, what the JASTA program was doing exactly, and how Saudi Arabia was actually funding. Just explain that one more time, just so we can completely understand that.
Saudi Arabia had paid these lobbying firms to get veterans to go to Washington D.C., stay in Trump Hotel. I stayed in Trump Hotel, and they had done this to lobby to influence Congress. We would actually go talk to these congressmen and senators, and they had done that to get us veterans a special class of citizens. Where these war fighters and everything, talking to congressmen and senators about stopping the JASTA bill so that 9/11 families could not sue Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you were one of the vets that they were trying to get to go up there, and so you were actually invited to Washington to stay at the Trump Hotel, so you could go out and go against the JASTA program.
Right.
Wow.
And
then you came out and did the opposite. Wow, that is awesome.
Yeah.
Wow, that is awesome. Okay, so then that's great. Now I completely understand that. Were there any other programs that you heard talked about that could be involved in that tie into that at all? Just out of curiosity, I just have that as a question. If not, that's okay.
I know there were other people doing the same thing, but they didn't get the deluxe treatment that we got.
I see.
So
what's the Trump Hotel like?
oh man, it's amazing.
Awesome.
I mean, it's really kind of overrated.
Oh really?
I wouldn't pay $400 to stay there, even if I was a millionaire.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is cool because you're in that historic, post office, and it was the post office in Washington D.C.
Oh really?
Yeah,
okay.
and
I did not know that. That's interesting.
I mean, it's really nice. And the funny thing is that every night at like 7 p.m. they have this lady come by, and she gives you chocolates and water. I was like, okay, well, I've never had this happen before.
Yeah.
Any place I've stayed.
It's like, make sure there's nothing in that water, right?
Exactly.
So, okay. So, how do you feel like the programming, the type of mind control programming, obviously that's affected the way that you socialize with people, and I mean, you seem, you're obviously easy to talk to and everything like that. But how do you feel like that's affected you? Do you think you miss social cues or something like that?
Yeah, exactly. So basically, it took me 7 years to get my mind back to the way it was.
Wow.
About the first year to 4 years after this happened, I would basically be with a group of people and wouldn't even communicate with them.
Wow.
Like my family, that kind of stuff. It wasn't so bad to where like I was a mute or anything, but it was like I didn't know what to say to have a conversation with somebody, or I didn't know I didn't know how to communicate, you know, what I was feeling or who I was,
Wow.
you know, that kind of stuff, you know.
Wow.
So it took 7 to 8 years to get my mind back. I had to reprogram my mind. So one of the things that happens when you go through something like this is that you have all these triggers. There's triggers everywhere. And you don't realize them until you reprogram your mind. And I was reprogramming my mind saying, is this accurate? Is this accurate? Is this accurate? When I felt a trigger, you know? And that's how I reprogrammed my mind. And
wow.
So it took 7 years of doing that every day. Every day I would figure out what was my trigger and why, and was that trigger accurate, you know? And so that's how I reprogrammed my mind.
So again, that's back to the type of mind control tactics that MK Ultra uses with these triggers.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example about what a trigger would be for you?
A trigger, well, it wouldn't. It wouldn't exactly be for me. A trigger wouldn't exactly be that I went into, you know, that type of thing.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what
a trigger for me during this time would be like if somebody was reflecting information that I don't know how to put it. Like,
would it cause you to when you say a trigger, did it trigger you to kind of go into an anxiety attack or something like that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. It would trigger, like, you know, somebody saying something about something, you know, I don't know. There's so many triggers that you can't pinpoint it down to one trigger.
So many examples.
Yeah. And the thing is like it would trigger you to go into an anxiety attack. It would trigger you to have paranoia. It would trigger you to have a panic attack. It triggered. There's so many triggers that it triggers all these things. And what I was doing when I was reprogramming my mind was to make sure that these triggers don't affect me anymore. So, basically, like, for instance, like synchronicity, okay? I'll give you an example. Like, when synchronicity, there was a lot of synchronicity that happened during this time. That's one thing I didn't talk about.
I have lots of those.
But synchronicity would, a lot of it would trigger me as well, because I had so much of it going on. And it would trigger all these different things. But that's only one aspect of it. But there's tons of triggers, you know. And
do you feel like this has affected you spiritually?
Oh, definitely.
I mean, with the whole force activation of the Kundalini almost.
Yeah.
And I mean, so obviously that can, I mean, I've heard that talked about as being, you know, dangerous and being activated Kundalini wrong. So how do you feel like it's affected you spiritually? How do you look at yourself and the world and all those things?
Basically,
kind of deep questions. Sorry, this is hit you with some deep questions.
Yeah, not to get dark, but I feel like the spiritual aspect, it has affected me negatively in the spiritual world.
Very understandable.
Because most of the time I'm like, most of this feels like bullshit, you know? But then other times I'm like, well, I'm meditating, so this is helping me. So I feel like, you know, if it doesn't work for me immediately, it feels like I feel like this is bullshit, you know? But
well, having been, you know, through what you've been through, I can totally understand that. Absolutely.
But there's other aspects where spiritually I can meditate on something, and like I reach a new level of understanding about something, you know.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing is like, I know you're a deep thinker, and I'm a deep thinker. But sometimes when I go into these meditations and I think about a certain idea or something, I can focus in on that so hard, like so better than most people, you know? And if you take away, okay, so it's very complicated because I do feel like a lot of stuff is bullshit. you know. But then but this other aspect of me is able to tune in to stuff that is beyond what other people can tune into. Like, there's so many walking sheep around, you know.
Yes, absolutely.
And like I've had to delete, like I've had to block like most people on my Facebook because they don't understand where I'm coming from, you know.
Absolutely.
And and the thing is like I go so deep. I mean, I don't know anybody who goes as deep as I do, you know.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool.
I mean, I'm sorry, but
No, that's great. I mean, that's one of the things about meditation, especially if you practice it continually. It really does help you when you have an issue or something like that. Like, I meditate every time I've got a serious issue that I'm like, I don't know what to do about this, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. You sit down and you really focus in on it, like you said, and you can just zoom in on that specific subject and just go through all the avenues of thought surrounding it, and then eventually you something clicks and you're just like, oh wow, I just transcended that issue. But that also helps you focus in the walking life, in waking life too. You know, when you're not meditating, it helps you focus and see through between the lines and so on and so forth. But yeah, it's definitely true. There's a lot of people walking around unaware of this, and I've had to go through the same thing with removing a lot of people from my Facebook to get this stuff, and it's such a shame because it's almost like we've become we're the prisoners and the prison guards. It's what I heard it say. Because you know, a lot of us are completely unaware of the fact that we're being enslaved, and then when people like us come out and start talking about the fact that we're being enslaved, it's really other people that hold us back from taking that further. It's our friends and family members that shut us down from you know, making a YouTube channel and talking about this.
You know, I always think about what you're talking about. What I always compare it to is Jesus, because Jesus came to this earth with a lot of truth and everything. And he was murdered for it, you know? So anybody, like you look at Martin Luther King, anybody who comes to this earth and has a lot of truth that they want to tell gets killed. You know?
Gets suppressed. You can look at Nikola Tesla. I mean, it just, the list goes on and on with that. So that is amazing. Good information here. So let's see. Let me see. Another good question, just to throw this out there. Have you received any kind of like backlash for coming out? Have you received threats?
Well, it's funny. I know. Well, I have had in the past when I came out. They did the same thing where they hacked me. It was kind of like a hack, but they sent me to this website that had stuff about. It basically said something about a non-disclosure agreement and a bunch of crap about DNA. So it was like this riddle, and it was talking about 46 chromosomes and all this other stuff. And anyways, so on the website it said something about a non-disclosure agreement, and it was pretty much like it was pretty much like a threat about DNA or something. I didn't really understand it, so I guess the subconscious maybe understood it. I don't really know.
So it's kind of like almost like an indirect threat. They just kind of send you some kind of.
And then another thing is, like last night before we did this interview, there was a cop telling me from where we go to drink, you know, the bar we go to drink. Told me from there to my house.
All the way from Muddy Lotus to here. Wow.
Yeah. So
that's strange too.
It's like, do you want to actually, you know, the thing is like it makes you paranoid, and it's like, you know, like why would that cop the night before I was going to do this tell me from there?
Oh,
you know?
Yeah, exactly.
But
and obviously. We're, you know.
But that's a stupid thing. I mean, he could have been going anywhere, you know.
Yeah, maybe he was trying to pull your over or something. Maybe he lived down the road or something.
Yeah, I don't know.
You never know. But that's one of those questionable things.
Yeah.
The only time I've had something kind of like that happen was one night I did a 20-minute live stream on Facebook about the Illuminati, and then the next day I had a black military helicopter fly over my house.
Yeah.
My parents were out, we were all outside and everything like that, but they flew by like it was just strange because of how slowly they've flown by.
Yeah, yeah.
I've never seen a like military helicopter fly over my house
Right.
like at that slow of a speed
Right.
before. It was like they were checking me out or something.
Exactly.
I could see that. So yeah, that sketched me out a little bit, but of course, you know, I tried to tell my parents about that. Like, did y'all see that? How slow the helicopter was flying? They were like, oh, the helicopter's flying all the time. The airport's right over there. I'm like, okay, whatever you say, right?
Right.
So.
A lot of the time I noticed that people that are sheep, you know,
Mhm.
they have to explain away a lot of this
exactly.
stuff.
For
So
their
that,
own.
so that
stability.
it's like a defense mechanism.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, they have to explain it away so that they don't think too deeply on it, you know.
Exactly. And there's a condition called cognitive dissonance that I've heard a lot about, and
yeah,
I'm sure
yeah.
you've heard about, of course, which is where you've grown up with this belief system your whole life based on religion or science or whatever, or experiences, and then you're shown compelling evidence that absolutely disproves what you believe to be true your whole life. Like, for example, if you're a super strong Christian and all of a sudden aliens showed up or something like that, you can have cognitive dissonance.
Right.
You can say, well, what is God? Totally, aliens don't negate that God exists, by the way, guys.
Right.
Obviously, there's a universal spirit that created everything, but it created aliens too. So you're not ruling out God by talking about aliens.
Exactly.
But people would experience that type of cognitive dissonance whenever you, and I've experienced that a lot. One of the worst things for me that I've experienced is when I post stuff about vaccines. Every time in the past, when I've posted things about vaccines, I've had mothers whose children have autism who vaccinated their children. Absolutely just attack me on Facebook. You know? But you know, I think this stuff needs to be talked about. So, and obviously that's a touchy subject, and I strongly empathize with those parents. You know.
And one of the things that I've noticed is because the world has got so crazy, is that now I've found myself not even taking a position. You know?
Yeah.
Like
you're just like, oh man, like, what's to even do? It's almost overwhelming, you know?
Yeah.
Where it's becoming more real for me every second talking to you here.
Okay.
So that is very good. So a couple of questions, for example, do you know anyone else who is in a similar position with you who's been falsely diagnosed or anything like that? Personally, do you know anyone?
No, I don't.
No, okay,
No.
that's fine. Just a couple of these questions you might not have an answer for. I wrote them down. And what was the name of the mental disorder that they diagnosed you with?
Schizoaffective.
Schizoaffective.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you know how to spell that?
SCHIZO.
Okay.
AFFECTIVE.
Okay. I just wanted to, for anyone who's skeptical or anything like that, I just want to tell them that. Okay. A few of the other questions are. Okay. I wanted to ask you what you thought about the Jeffrey Epstein case. I wanted to get your input on that.
Jeffrey Epstein was so he worked for Mossad, basically. He worked for Mossad, which is also an Illuminati front, because the Five Eyes is the Five Eyes intelligence agencies of the Western world, are all an Illuminati front. So
makes sense. Five Eyes. They love the eye symbolism.
Yeah. And so Jeffrey Epstein was So going back to the guy that my dad knew in Oklahoma, he worked for the CIA. Well, anyways, he was part of Air America. Well, anyways, one of his partners or friends, who was also in Oklahoma, they did a lot of stuff with prostitution and that kind of stuff. Now, this guy wasn't part of, the guy that my dad knew wasn't part of this prostitution thing, but his friend was. So one of the things that my dad and my brother, who researched a lot of this kind of stuff, talked about was they would have like politicians go to these places and they would sleep with these girls and stuff. And there's more to it than what I'm saying, but anyways, they would get blackmailed, and these were American politicians.
Absolutely, I've heard this.
And this was run by my dad's friend's friend, who was also part of the CIA. He's now in Brazil because they charged him with some stuff, and that was all in Oklahoma. And anyways, so the Jeffrey Epstein case is just a different intelligence agency from a different country doing the same thing our country has done to politicians, you know, and people of great status and power, you know. So all that is to do is to get them to do what the Illuminati wants them to do, you know, because...
So they force people into precarious situations, get them on camera, you know, sleeping with prostitutes or with sometimes young girls.
It's pretty much young girls, yeah.
Yeah, young girls and who are sex slaves to begin with.
It's servitude through blackmail, you know.
And then they use that, they use that as blackmail. Wow. Well, and you know the whole thing. The day we were supposed to hear about the whole case with Jeffrey Epstein, there were 3 mass shootings on the day. That we were supposed to hear about that. That's another thing I wanted to bring up. There's a book by something Cooper called "Behold the Pale Horse." And
I have
you have the book.
Yeah,
you told me about. I think you told me you read that book. Yeah, I've only read parts of the book, but in one part of the book they talk about mass shootings, and they say that they use a combination of pharmaceuticals and hypnosis to take people who already have mental disorders and to make them go and then basically do like we were saying, trigger them like the Winter Soldier thing to turn them into killers and make them just want to kill everyone.
And if you look at these mass shootings, like the guy in Las Vegas, like the guy that was at was it Penn State? It was a long time ago. Was it Penn State? I think it was Penn State. Anyways, if you research that, all their computers get taken away. Why did their computers get taken away? Like, nobody can find their computers, like their laptops and that kind of stuff. Why do they get taken away? They're not part of the investigation. Well, they are part of the investigation, but they go missing before the investigation actually happens into what was on the computer, you know?
Exactly.
So
they make sure to clean up all the evidence.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So, let's see. This is all really, really good. I'm so excited about this. I can't wait to get this out. Let's see. So, okay. That's almost all the questions that I had here that were. Do you know about Project Bluebird? Have you heard about Project Bluebird?
That's the UFO thing?
No, actually, that I think is Project Blue Beam.
Oh, Blue Beam. Okay.
Yeah, it's Project Blue Beam is the UFO thing. Okay,
I don't know about Bluebird.
No, Bluebird, Project Bluebird, apparently that tied into the whole MK Ultra thing. I was learning more about
that.
Okay. That tied into the whole MK Ultra thing.
Well, tell me about it.
Well, I was just doing research on today. I was hoping you could tell me about it.
I forgot about it. There's so much information that... Oh, and another thing is, that I didn't tell you, is that when this was going on, when I was on these drugs or whatever they had me on, like, there was so much information that went into, like, I knew about frequencies and I knew about all this stuff, and I never researched that stuff before. And it's like this flood of information went into my brain, and it was almost like the next 10 years of my life researching all this stuff had just been flooded into my brain. So, I don't know if that makes any sense to you.
This is, you think that they're kind of like using technology and frequency to feed information into your brain.
Right.
Wow. And so they did this before you really started doing a lot of in-depth research on it?
Right, exactly.
Wow.
Because when all that happened, I had no idea what the Illuminati was. I had no idea about any of this stuff.
And so that's so strange that, you know, they must have underestimated your mental willpower or something.
Yeah.
It's so strange that they would try and recruit you like that. And well, it's not really strange. I'm saying it's strange. It's not really strange. It makes perfect sense. So wow, that's another interesting part. Do you think that there is a possibility that we can do something about this? That's another question that I have. Is it possible to bring justice to these type of programs? Did your 28-page article, did that reach a lot of people, or are you aware if that made any type of difference? Or?
Oh yeah, that definitely made some difference.
Okay.
But the thing about changing what's going on is we're not going to change what the Illuminati and what the Five Eyes are doing until we change the technology. We have to change the economic system before we can change them. You know.
So we need to. So really, the only way that, and from what I've researched and critical thinking and everything.
Well, let me just explain it. The reason we have to change the technology and change the economic structure is we have all these free energy devices, we have all this stuff, but it's not going to make an impact until we implement it, and the reason they're holding it back is because it's going to change their power structure.
Exactly.
How are they going to get power when we have free energy?
Exactly.
How are they going to get our money when we have free energy?
Exactly. No need for currency when you've got free energy,
Exactly.
free healthcare.
Yeah.
The cure to all disease. It actually, and what's so interesting about free energy devices, in many cases, they have healing benefits. It's really, really pretty amazing, actually. And all this technology has been suppressed. This, world-changing technology. For example, we were talking about MIT earlier. I've heard that MIT actually in 2016. It was when they were going through that really bad drought. It may have been 2017 when they were going through that really bad drought. MIT students actually developed a technology that could desalinate ocean water.
Excellent.
And apparently the byproduct could be of they're taking the salt out. They're making pure water, but then the byproduct of the salt, apparently they could make it into anything on the periodic table that you wanted.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
wow,
so it's really super useful. Invention, but it is patented by MIT. It's patented by the university. So, and they're not coming out with this because obviously they're under control. So it's just it's amazing that there's so many scientists and students at universities who have made amazing inventions.
Yeah.
I was just reading an article on Facebook about some people in Africa who made a desalination filtration system out of nothing.
Yeah.
And yet we pretend like it's impossible.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that people are unaware of. I really think that bringing awareness to stuff like this, like your story and all these type of corruption, I think that bringing attention and really making more people aware of it is the first step. Because obviously they are only controlling us by our own free will. And I think that goes down to a spiritual level too. That there's a cosmic law of free will that they have to get our authorization. That's why they put their agenda out in the movies and TV shows and all that. So we see it and we accept it as, we don't think of it as being real, but we accept it as being fiction. And so that's getting our unconscious authorization for them to continue doing these things. That's how I kind of, and I told you, you're not going to sound crazy, right? Yeah. I'm the one who's going to sound crazy in these interviews because essentially what they're doing is utilizing our collective consciousness, which is a huge part of their mystery school teachings. Going all the way back to ancient Egypt is the idea that we have a collective consciousness that we can manifest and create because we're actually the creator in these incarnate states. So what they've done is because they don't have the ability themselves, because their whole religion and spiritual belief is based on separation.
In Hollywood, tried to make a movie about me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's called Light Wounds.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Really? You made a movie about you?
He tried to.
You tried to. What happened?
It just hasn't gone through yet.
Oh, okay.
So it's been like 8 years, so I don't think it's ever gonna go through.
Go through? You mean like approved or something?
Like get green lighted or whatever. So.
Yeah. Well, I wonder why they wouldn't green light that.
Yeah.
Right.
But it was more based on mental illness and that kind of stuff. So.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyways.
So okay. So I think we've got through most of my questions today. I'll try and come up with more questions, and we can go more into depth in your testimony if you'd like to.
Okay.
But I feel like, I mean, is there anything else that you want to share today that we haven't got out?
I don't know what to share. There's so much, you know.
Well, anyways, Dustin, I want to thank you very much for coming forward with your testimony and reaching out to me at Muddy Lotus, because I've been so excited about getting this information out there, and having someone like you with a real, you know, boots on the ground. You were in the type of testimony. I think that's going to help. I mean, it's helping it become a lot more real for myself after having done research on this and hearing from other insiders who I haven't met personally. Hearing this from them has been, you know, mind-blowing, life-changing, all that. But hearing it from you, face to face, it really is becoming a lot more real. And I hope that it becomes a lot more real for everyone watching as well, because we are the only ones who can do something about this. It ultimately comes down to those of us who are awake, who are aware of these things, to take action and to start doing something to make progress towards a better world, because I believe it's possible. I mean, if the world can function with such a screwed up system like we have today, and what's to me I think is a shame is that so many people, you know, like the word utopia is like a curse word or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You don't talk about the word utopia, but when you actually bring up the idea of free energy, and you actually bring up the whole, I mean, how much that would change the planet itself, it does start to sound like it could be possible for a perfect world. You know, we don't need war. We don't need to fight each other. In fact, if we stopped competing and started working together, then the world would be a much better place.
Well, here's another thing is, I was talking to my friend the other day. He's 20 years in the Army. He said, you know what, they're going to replace soldiers with AI. And the AIs are going to be doing the killing. So, you know, so
he's been in there for 20 years. He's been briefed probably.
Right.
So that's another thing where we could talk about artificial intelligence for a long time.
I know you're short on time, so.
Well, I mean, we've already got an hour almost worth of footage and stuff that I'm gonna have to edit together. And so but man, I'm really excited for this. I need a great episode to come out. And next time maybe we'll talk more about AI and that type of stuff. We can talk more about the other aspects of the Illuminati's agenda, because we didn't even get into, like, we touched on corporations and stuff like that. But I think we've got a lot of great info for this video, and again I want to thank you, Dustin, for coming forward and for being here with us today, and thank our viewers for watching. Hopefully this reaches thousands of people once I get this all put together, and we can start making a difference and helping people who are in these precarious situations. So, thanks for joining Living Perspective. I'm Wesley McNair, and I'm going to shut this off.